they did. So it was a pre-revenue round, Ravi, just to get us started. And post
Mhm.
that, we never had a need for raising more funds, dilutive capital. We did raise non-dilutive capital in the form of revenue-based financing and so on,
What
invoice
does
finance.
it mean? I have a question on that one. What does dilutive, non-dilutive capital mean?
So dilutive capital is essentially when you are raising funds against equity.
Uh,
So the raise that we
okay,
did from,
got it.
right,
Hmm,
and non-dilutive is more on a venture debt or a debt line,
got it.
right? So we did that specifically during the COVID second wave and so on, when for a few months the going was very tough. We had to rely on non-dilutive capital. We did not want to go back to our investors time again and again and ask for funds. When you're looking at raising funds from outside, whether both dilutive and non-dilutive, there is a certain other credibility also that you bring in when you have a third party trusting you, with their capital. So that is what we did. So, what one of the things that we track, Ravi, personally, I'm very fond of is something that we call as a progress per dollar. Is that the amount of funds that we raised, how far we have reached, and just in November, last month, we actually did in revenues in that particular month what the amount that we had raised in Feb of 2020. So that's how much we have turned around the investor capital. We did it in 1 month, the amount that we
Could you
had raised
explain?
there.
I did not catch that. What is
Uh-huh.
that? What is that KPI that you track, and how
It's
do?
it's sure it's a progress per dollar that we talk about, Ravi. Is that for every dollar, how much progress you have made against that?
What do you
So
mean
the
by
more
progress? Progress in what metric?
it could be in any sense, Ravi. It could be in terms of saving your costs. It could be in terms of adding new beds. It could be in terms of increased top line, right? So you do not have to rely on more capital to funnel your growth, but the cost of growth is coming down. Does that help, Ravi?
Okay, okay,
So
okay.
for every additional dollar, you are spending less and less.
Got
So
Is it
that's how you're.
something
Uh-huh.
that the industry tracks? Is it something that the investor keeps a keen eye on for startups to see?
It's
Okay,
more
progress.
it's more of something, Ravi, I borrowed from our tech experiences, not so much
Okay,
from this space as of yet.
got it.
But that is something that I really look at rather than looking at MRRs and ARRs, which could all be misleading to some extent.
Got
But this is a progress per dollar, which is very, very raw. It is what it is. So if I
Mm,
the one example that I gave you is that if we raise a certain amount in Feb of 2020, that is, say for example we raised X dollars. X dollar is what we did in 1 month revenue last month. You know, so that's how
mm,
much it has turned around that capital to go with the 5,000 beds and the 30 assets and so on.
mm.
So we are very, very proud of it. And in fact, I think a lot of credit for that goes to my team who worked relentlessly through the COVID wave, figuring out all sorts of way to keep the lamps burning, hustling, partnering with hospitals, partnering with manufacturing companies who were into essential services and so on. So we did all possible things to keep the things going.
Got it.
And yeah, so now we're in a position, Ravi, where thankfully we have kind of over that COVID wave. So now it's the time to encash and grow. So that's where we are currently, Ravi.
Got it. Uh, I'm also very curious about the non-dilutive debt that you
Mhm.
talked about, and
Yeah.
I was reading up, and I realized that you raised from recurclub.com. Um,
Yes.
could you
Mhm.
first of all, what's the interest? Because the
Yeah.
interest percentage is also very important. I am assuming non-dilutive without any stake would
Mhm.
be highly expensive, isn't it? Could you
It-
just demystify
Sure.
that space a little bit?
Sure. Sure.
Is it
So I
becoming
think
very popular these days?
it is becoming popular simply because it is non-dilutive. It gives you that growth capital that you need without giving up your equity. And I think as first-time entrepreneurs, we only have only think in the direction of raising funds from institutional capital via equity and so on. So what Recur and Club are doing, and then there are just the two names. There are several other revenue-based financing companies in India right now who are working on similar models. So that particularly helps, Ravi, in an industry like ours because of two things. One is that, as we mentioned earlier, there's a predictability to the business. You know exactly what is your earnings next month is going to be next month or 6 months down the line. So once you have predictable cash flows, you know that if I have to share a particular interest rate with someone, or there's a particular interest rate, then how much am I going to pay in terms of my EMIs or whatever it is, right? So that makes it easier for a business like ours, Ravi, to get into non-dilutive capital. So what typically how it works, the revenue-based financing, and this may be for the audience who are getting it for the first time. So typically how revenue-based financing works is that the the revenues that you do every month. So there is a certain percentage that is fixed by the revenue based financing company. So we create an escrow account. The sales that you have every day, it kind of first goes into that escrow account, and say the percentage revenue that is decided is a 5%. So now if today I have 100 rupees going into that escrow account via sales that I had that day, out of that 100 rupees, the revenue based financing company will take away 5 rupees, and then the 95 rupees comes to me, right? So every
Okay.
day you are paying 5% of it. So at the end of the month, you have paid 5% of your monthly revenues to the revenue based
Mm,
financing company. Now,
right.
the good part here is that your tenure is fixed. Amount that you have raised is not going to be repaid before the tenure, because then your interest has become much higher. So it is spread throughout the tenure, right? So if it is a 6 month tenure, it won't get over before that. So now, if for instance in the fifth month they have deducted a significant portion, and there is a very small part remaining for the sixth month, or maybe last month, so then they will reduce the percentage that is going to be charged from your revenue. So this percentage that is charged from the revenue is kind of fluctuating based on your performance. If your revenues are very high, the 5% of 200, so you are giving back 10 rupees on that month towards your repayment. If the revenues are low, you are paying a lesser amount. So it doesn't put a strain on you, unlike a fixed EMI, right? Now, in a fixed
Mm,
EMI, irrespective of how your business is doing, you have to pay that,
mm,
right? But in a revenue-based financing, the percentage that is charged gets adjusted accordingly, so you do not feel the pinch of it that much. Okay,
I
so
see.
that is one part. But as you rightly pointed out, Ravi, all this, I mean, whether it is revenue-based financing or venture debt, or even if you're borrowing from the banks, if that is non-collateralized, then the interest rates are on the higher side. Um, it typically starts, for instance, when we started collaboration with one of the groups that you mentioned, the interest rates was close to about 18 to 19%. But we you know we the given the repayment history and no defaults and so on, the deals that we now do with them have close to like 12 to 13%. I think
Ah,
it's
nice.
kind of, the more confidence you build with them in terms of a repayments, you start getting better and better offers. That's again something which is very good about the whole revenue based financing industry. So yeah, so if someone is looking to raise funds for the first time, I think, Ravi, through your podcast, I'd like to reach out to them and say that, hey, don't just restrict yourself to dilutive capital, but do consider non-dilutive capital. There are lots and lot of players in India who are providing that, and that's a very good way to grow initially. Because again, I mean, not just our industry, Ravi, but a lot of other industries are just coming out of COVID, and the investor sentiments are still not very strong. So if you are looking to raise dilutive capital now, the valuations that you might get may not be very favorable. You might have to dilute a lot. So rather than doing that, look at non-dilutive capital for about a year or so, raise the funds that you need for survival or growth, and then go for higher equity raise or so on. But yeah, the non-dilutive capital, Ravi, is a very good alternative. Now, and
So
not
you,
for all businesses, but yeah,
yeah,
businesses which have predictable cash flows.
and this is primarily good for survival or to get short term cash. Am I right? Because if you need
Mhm.
a lot of cash,
Yeah.
sometimes like 50 millions, or I
Mhm.
mean, some of these big players raise 100
Yeah.
millions and stuff like that. For
Mhm.
that, you go back to the investors. Otherwise,
Yes. Yes. For
is that,
that,
is that
Ravi,
a good
yeah.
differentiation?
Absolutely. I think revenue-based financing, the quantum or the ticket that you have available currently is more for seed to early stage companies, and not so much for later stage.
Got it.
When you talk about later stage companies, if you're looking to raise 30, 40 or upwards million USD, again, there also you have the option of looking at venture debt. There are 4 or 5 large venture debt firms in India who provide significant capital to the tune of 10, 15, or even 20 million. So if you're, say, for instance, if you're looking to raise a 50 million, it is not necessary that entire 50 million needs to be dilutive or equity
Got it.
based.
Right.
It could be a mix of equity and venture debt as well. So that
Got it.
also helps you save on the equity. But yes, revenue based financing is at the current moment, Ravi, structured more towards early stage and seed stage companies. And it need not be only for growth, not only for survival. It could be growth capital. For example, in our case, when we started raising non-dilutive capital last year during the COVID time, it was for survival. But now, when we're looking to raise non-dilutive capital or raising non-dilutive capital, it is more to fuel our growth rather than sustainability.
Got it. And what do these operators, revenue-based financing operators, look for to qualify for the funds?
You need to have good books, Ravi. You need to have the books which have sufficient capital in it. so that these groups have a confidence that you have the ability for repayment, or there is sufficient cash that you're generating of the business. And of course, and if for instance, example, in our case, since we are backed by a strategic group, that also gives them the confidence that, look, if it comes to that, these guys always have that strategic group to go back to and ask for more funds. So their, the revenue based financing, their funds are always secured in a way, right, with us. So I think they look for stability of the business, Ravi. They look for predictable cash flows. They look for the free cash flows that you have on your books, so that you can make the repayments, and also the runway. How many months you have cash left.
Got it.
So these are the 4 or 5 things that they look at.
Got it. By the way, you have a strategic partner already, group backing
Right.
you. Why
Yeah.
would you still? So that
Mhm.
strategic partner is meant to fund you in your
They
journey,
already
no?
did. They already did, right? So when
I
we
see.
raised the equity round in Feb 2020, they already put in capital.
Got it.
When now we're looking at non-dilutive capital, Ravi, it's just that, as I mentioned, if you're borrowing from
Got
someone
it.
outside of that,
Got
it's
it.
just
Got
a
it. Got
different confidence it gives you.
it. Got it. Got it. Yeah, because if they back you, if they then it is all
Yeah, I mean, it
it's
just
dilutive. Yeah,
is dying. I mean, they could also. They have, during the COVID second wave, they were nice enough to also give us a credit facility. I mean, the
I see.
strategic investor that we have, not necessarily dilutive capital. They were good, nice enough to come and say, Chinmoy, if it comes to that, if it comes to survival, then we are extending a credit line to you, so you
Got it.
can borrow it from there.
Got it.
But yes, just that, if you can convince somebody outside of that, Ravi, and borrow from there,
Right.
that's a whole different. It gives the business a different credibility rather than going on borrowing from the same investor.
Got it. Got it. Excellent.